Welcome to Get Wisdom Live with Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. What if God was also a co-host? What if the historically rare ability to question God directly and get profound answers back has been rediscovered? What would God say to today's sophisticated but deeply troubled world? Get Wisdom Live is here to share those answers with you. Here is Carl Mollison and Brian Kelly. Welcome to another episode of Get Wisdom Live. I'm Brian Kelly, along with Get Wisdom founder and director, Carl Mollison. This week, we're going to look at an interesting topic. It's one that everybody's aware of, but probably hasn't given a lot of thought to, at least lately. But it's very, very important. It's creator's perspective on witchcraft, Carl.
Yes, well, this will probably surprise people who have been following our work. But this is nothing new, obviously. Most people think of it as sort of a holdover, a relic of an era of great ignorance and misunderstanding and misattribution of ordinary evil to be embraced by superstitious beliefs and then given greater credence than really is deserved, and that this is something people have exaggerated. But I'm here to tell you that isn't so. Witchcraft is alive and well. And I have clients who are suffering tremendously, and we'll touch on that a little bit as we have time in addition to your questions, Brian. But this is something we need to be aware of and take seriously. And this is a component of our healing work, always to address things that have been launched.
Yes.
Because there can be things going on like curses and so on that are a part of this sort of dark art, the art of witchcraft. And people aren't even aware that they're under attack, but yet it can have effects. So this is a big topic, but we'll give some examples.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is an important centerpiece of the LHP, actually, is dealing with this kind of thing, because it is a huge problem. So it's high time we kind of took a look at it. U.S. creator, many of today's questions are inspired by the book Witchcraft in Illinois by historian Michael Kleen. The history of witchcraft in Illinois is scattered and sparse, but what remains, especially a massive full compilation of just one county, suggests that even as recently as a century ago, folk knowledge of witchcraft was common, also suggesting that the practice of witchcraft was once common as well. Kleen wrote, "Convinced of American progress, historians dismissed witchcraft as a miserable superstition and an imaginary crime, long vanished from educated minds." What is creator's perspective?
All right, and this is what I channeled from creator. This is creator's words. Your question is taking a leaf from the book you cite, but it is quite naive in assuming the lack of many historical accounts in the writings of Americans means that this is true worldwide. We can tell you not only is witchcraft alive and well all around the world, but still alive and well within America. It is simply less talked about and less assumed to be an active practice, and so has indeed faded from the culture in terms of the average person's awareness. But there are many who go looking for ways to gaining some kind of advantage in life and stumble across written accounts of witchcraft and various writings about ancestral lore invoking the dark arts in various forms. They go by many differing names depending on the cultural context. The whole practice of the Wiccan community is a current day offshoot from the witchcraft of old. It has been dressed up and repackaged for a gentler era, but the yearnings are the same, to have some kind of power, some kind of magic one can use to make things happen in unconventional ways. That is a natural inner desire because, as former light beings, you have been quite used to using your consciousness alone to create, to make things happen, and to command large energetic forces for all kinds of purposes. That is lost almost entirely when you incarnate as a physical human. But there are workarounds that can indeed resonate with and engage with other kinds of energy from other consciousnesses than human. And that is what witchcraft draws upon and is used primarily for dark purposes. The key distinction here is that something done to manipulate, even for a worthy purpose, is a manipulation nonetheless. If it is done through magic, through the dark arts in some way or another, it is taking a shortcut and not above board. So even though someone wanting to create a win-win scenario, if they're manipulating another individual, for example, to encourage love to bloom and have a life partner, that might be satisfactory to both parties and enjoyed. But if it starts with a manipulation, it leaves open the question, would it have developed naturally without that extra force being brought to bear? And this creates a karmic misstep that will need to be reckoned with through the law of karma to exact a repayment, to rebalance the debt incurred by taking advantage of someone unbeknownst to them.
Well, this is definitely an eye-opening channeling. It's interesting because creators saying that essentially all witchcraft, whether you consider it black or white, is a manipulation of other people specifically. Mostly, maybe not in every situation, but mostly it is, and that's an interference with their free will, and that's going to be a karmic misstep. And even if it works out as a win-win situation, creator is reiterating that maybe there was other plans in store. There might have been a karmic dilemma that person was supposed to deal with that got sidestepped because of your intervention, and so the main purpose of even living their entire life is suddenly thwarted. So we don't know. That's the problem. Is that we're like the in Fantasia, Mickey Mouse, the magician apprentice, not knowing what the heck he's doing, right? And the impact of his magic, and that's what's happened. That's what creator's telling us here. This, you're not seeing the whole picture, and when you interfere, you can really making a karmic misstep big time.
Well, and the other thing I would add to that is that I see witchcraft as what happens, a good example of what happens when people move away from belief in the divine and look for something else, something better, something maybe more effective than they've been able to invoke through
Right.
prayer, for example, and seemingly not have prayers answered for them and so on. And so, in a kind of vacuum, the darkness intrudes.
Yeah.
And that is what this is representing. It's a substitute for a divine partnership, and it will lead to bad outcomes no matter how you want to go about it and what the cause is where you start. It can be a slippery slope and draw people to more and more misalignment and more distancing from the divine.
But we can see the temptation clearly because the dark arts will perhaps enable a more profound, quicker solution that you think you want quicker than prayer will, because creator is not going to interfere with other people's free will, whereas the darkness will. So it might be a more efficient way to get things done in the short term, but the long term costs are prohibitive. You ask creator. We learned recently from creator that reptilians taught sorcery to early Native Americans. One of the feared powers of witches was the supposed power to shapeshift and take on the form of an animal, for instance. A great many folk tales recount incidents of witches taking on the form of a black cat, for instance, to stalk the witch's victims. Were some of these incidents genuine, but involving shape-shifting reptilians taking on the persona of a witch in order to spread fear and disbelief and belief? Actually, to spread the belief of witchcraft, right?
Yes. This is what Creator tells us. These practices have been encouraged at times by the interlopers, exactly as you describe, by the reptilians in particular, because they are shape shifting beings who can use their consciousness to change form into any other creature by reconfiguring their energy. What is not needed is held in another dimension until an intention is acted upon to recombine the whole, to perhaps return to their native state as a reptilian being, or to go into some other configuration, perhaps. As such, the reptilians have, in effect, a magical capability that would naturally astound human beings who were naive and unaware of their existence and might well see them as gods. But if wrongdoing is suggested, would begin to see them as perhaps a satanic influence. And that would not be far from the truth of things, because reptilians are psychopaths and never wanting to help humanity, but only cause mischief and greater harm, including acts of genocide. So the infusion of knowledge about using psychic attacks, which is a more general term for entraining conscious intention to effect an end result that brings harm to another individual, was done to create confusion, fear, and add to general dissatisfaction and points of friction within the culture. This was intended to drag things down and was quite effective in doing so. The term witch hunt comes from episodes in history where witchcraft was suspected of causing serious problems, and an aroused and angry public went on literal witch hunts to find the culprit, using the dark arts for wrongdoing and seeking retribution to punish them, and perhaps an ultimate sanction through execution to prevent further wrongdoing. Because witchcraft and its influence is not easily traced with any kind of accuracy, this is a prescription for legal disaster in not being able to be sure who was a culprit and who was someone simply under suspicion. And that is an invitation to not only see many mistaken judgments, but even purposeful manipulation of group fear to get revenge readily against an adversary, simply by making accusations and letting the hysteria of the times run away with the rumor and end in the death of falsely accused individuals. Because witchcraft is real, so it is possible to cause harm through consciousness when one knows how to do so. Such stories likely have a basis in reality. There is always an aura of uncertainty and fear, which can be exaggerated, but many times there was a true basis in reality where someone was purposefully harmed through witchcraft. This, in effect, is a kind of pact with the devil, so to speak, because what it is doing is making a willful choice to depart from divine alignment. This is true anytime someone chooses to harm others, regardless of the way it is done. So, because witchcraft is subtle and not easily traced, one can get away with wrongdoing. But that is only in a legal sense, not in a moral one. So, practitioners of witchcraft will owe karmic penalties for each and every karmic misstep they take when they seek to manipulate someone else, which is an invasion of personal sovereignty, regardless of intention, and not appropriate because it is a violation of their free will and free agency to make their own choices. Such karmic penalties will always eventually take a toll because the law of karma seeks a rebalancing. And if the karmic debt comes due, may arrange a repayment that is quite painful and even life shortening in some cases.
Well, this certainly pays homage to the actual known history of witchcraft, especially in the United States, with the Salem trials and all that kind of thing. It was truly hysteria. What most people obviously would think was that it was all based on nothing, but creators telling us, no, 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 it's not based on nothing. It's based on something. But it also highlights the fact that this is a highly, highly problematic issue. And really, the best solution is not a legal solution, and certainly not a witch hunt. It is protection, and that you can only get really effectively from the divine realm, Carl.
Well, and this particular question and answer adds to my thesis that the absence of the divine invites the darkness to move in.
Yep.
And here we have direct commentary from the creator of all it is that extraterrestrial interlopers have come among us and taught witchcraft
Yeah.
and probably other forms of manipulations, using their own advanced capabilities as a convincer,
Yep. Yep.
and unleashed this practice
Yes.
of formalized attacking one another very surreptitiously and very insidiously. And it's not gone away.
No,
It,
it's
it
definitely
just
not going
keeps
away.
rolling, and people teach it to one another now.
Yep. Yep. You can buy books right now on Amazon to learn it if you want. Now, we're not advocating that, but yeah, the material is not hidden; it's available. Oh, you asked creator. Clean noted that religion, although according to history being widely practiced, was actually rarely used to combat fear and victimization by witchcraft. Rather, what was popular was fighting fire with fire, in that those fancying themselves and loved ones and neighbors and associates as victims of witchcraft would fight back essentially with witchcraft of their own by hiring or engaging witch doctors or witch masters who would combat the witch for them, for a fee, of course. Others, fearing being bewitched, would resort to folk defenses, such as shooting silver bullets at effigies of suspected witches. Since such remedies leave out the divine, the likelihood of massive karmic missteps for all involved seems obvious. What can Creator tell us?
All right, and these are Creator's words. This is a historically accurate account of how the practice of witchcraft was hugely corrupting because it would motivate many, many individuals to indulge in the practices who otherwise would not, simply because they were victimized and could find no other practical way to seek retribution. It is never divine to fight fire with fire. Two wrongs do not make a right, so it is a karmic misstep to seek vengeance. That is not the role of the divine human to make amends by exacting payment through retribution in some way. That is the job of divine energy, and largely through the law of karma to see to. That does not mean you need to lie down to be trampled on by anyone who might wish to do so, but there are better ways to deal with wrongdoing than committing wrongdoing oneself. Seeking divine solutions is a much better answer. It may not be as immediately effective, but it is a far better choice than to stoop to the level of the perpetrator and take up their dark ways. The world today has many active vendettas going, grudge matches, and there are many areas of the world where practitioners of the dark arts, like witchcraft, make their services available for a fee. And this gets many contests going with perpetrators and victims taking turns in their respective roles as their hired guns, so to speak, launch volleys of attacks via witchcraft back and forth. This is a fool's errand because where does it end? And who does it truly serve? When all become tainted by the process underway and will pay the piper eventually for the wrongdoing they took part in. It is also true that even being a victim creates a karmic debt because you are entrusted with the safeguarding of your soul. And if you fail to do so, that is a karmic misstep also. It might seem unfair to pay a penalty for being victimized, but this is not an easy world to navigate and is part of the learning. The goal of life in the physical is to overcome the problem of evil and learn to stand strong and eventually become invulnerable. That is a tough standard that few meet, but the learning along the way will serve all involved for all of time because all the wounds, deep and shallow, make a contribution to learning and growth. There will be better times if you can arrange that to happen, and you will get beyond such petty practices and will no longer be in an environment where others seek to destroy you or make you suffer and use nefarious means like witchcraft to do so. But you must survive to be able to create a successful ascension to better circumstances. There are many charlatans involved in various schemes and many would be remedies that are more superstition than a valid way to deal with energetic attacks. The best solution is always to have divine healing to undo the damage that has been caused and to begin healing the perpetrators behind it, as well as the victim. That is the ultimate answer here for making the world a better one.
And, I don't think you can get better protection than divine protection. But in order to get that, it's got to be asked for either by you or a third party who's doing it on your behalf, Carl.
Well, and I've had many people come to me with these kinds of issues, and it was eye-opening all along the way to see how commonly this happens, and at high levels with lots of money behind it. I had a
Sure.
client who was living here in the US who emigrated here with her son after being involved in a marriage to an oil sheik in the Middle East. And she left him because the marriage was terrible and so on, and I won't get into that, but he the child was the sole heir of this
Mm.
powerful person. And as retribution, because the husband believed she kind of like absconded with with the heir
Right.
to the power structure, the family lineage and so on, he hired high-level sorcerers to attack her. And this went on and on and on. They attacked everything around her and about her and of her. They went after her. They went after the son. They went after her business. They went after her home. They went after her automobile and caused all kinds of things to break, to have people attacking her and bringing conflicts her way. It was a nightmare.
Yeah.
So, this is an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
This is nothing to trifle with,
Rather
and
sobering.
it's evil. It's a
Oh,
form of evil.
absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I hope there's been some resolution. Or, of course, it could still be ongoing, I guess. I don't know.
Well, we can't
Can't
we
say,
can't get
but
into too much of the details of these sort of things because then it can be traced back to people, and we're very
right.
protective of our clients and their
Yeah.
circumstances. But this is not an easy thing. I'll tell you
No, and
that.
it certainly speaks to the need for ongoing protection and the
Exactly.
need for ongoing requests for protection. Very, very important. And in terms of making those requests, the best way to do it is empowered prayer. And you can get our prayer book that talks about empowered prayer and gives you examples of empowered prayer for you to use at getwisdom.com/prayer, getwisdom.com/prayer. And for a deeper dive and more comprehensive approach to protection, as well as solving the problem of evil and making sure the divine human free will project succeeds, is to use and learn the Lightworker Healing Protocol. You can get their ebook on that at getwisdom.com/LHP. Carl, US creator Clean wrote, winning love, attracting a man or woman, and keeping them faithful was, as it has always been, a primary concern, and much of the folk magic recorded was dedicated to those ends. Most love spells were examples of contagious magic. Contagious magic involved the use of physical ingredients that were once in contact with the targeted person. Physical proximity of material items such as hair and blood, and the ingestion or binding of these items was believed to increase the spell's potency. You know, the Lightworker Healing Protocol has a section on, the erasing energy from your personal possessions. So this is a very, very important question, and the answer is very important too. What can Creator tell us, Carl?
All right. Creator says practices with this intention can indeed result in bringing people together to develop a relationship that is lasting. This may or may not be a major karmic misstep, but always involves a deception of some kind because it is a manipulation that is arranged unilaterally and not with the permission of the targeted individual. Many times it is quite nefarious and would never be approved of if done out in the open, and as such is sinister in a kind of evil manipulation because it goes against personal sovereignty. And that is a moral, ethical, and karmic misstep that will have consequences. Everything that happens as a result will add to eventual personal misfortune when it is revisited on the manipulator who uses witchcraft to gain an advantage for personal and selfish reasons. When people manipulate someone else to have a love partner, that is not truly love in action, but desire, passion, in service to the ego of the practitioner to help them get what they want, to make their life better, at least in their perspective. The fact they are manipulating their target to find them appealing and desirable puts a lie to the justification and desired end result of being admired. After all, how rewarding can that truly be, and how meaningful if a love partner has been manipulated in the first place to take an interest? It is, in effect, living a lie. And by altering the life journey of the person manipulated into the relationship, can represent a huge karmic liability by thwarting what otherwise would happen with that individual and others they may have engaged with and had a genuine love relationship and family, and on and on. The entire destinies of whom were derailed by commandeering that person in a selfish manner and being controlled by a spell. This is a good example of ill gotten gains, even though it might seem to be done willingly. If the spell works, and even if it gives some benefit to the victim who might, for example, never have a love relationship, that still will not matter karmically. The fact remains this was a manipulation, and the manipulator will owe a karmic debt for sure. Here again, there is need for divine intervention. First of all, to have a partnership with the divine and to ask for protection from misfortunes of all kinds. That will reduce the possibility of something like this happening because things like spells can be neutralized through a divine healing to transform the energy and transmute it into something harmless or redirecting it in a beneficial way that is appropriate and in divine alignment rather than to manipulate and control another person. But that must be asked for with some intelligent awareness of its importance, and there must be belief in the divine as well for the divine realm to act on someone's behalf.
This is fertile ground for probably some more questions for Creator in the future. But if you think about the efficacy of these approaches, um, indeed, we know that love feelings can be manipulated. There's a thing called the alien love bite, for instance. We know that aliens have the technology and the ability to do that. So it kind of begs the question that, if you engage in a spell, we also know that the aliens are always monitoring the intuitive landscape to pick up anybody who's sending out an intuitive exploration or request, even, right? So you wouldn't
Yes.
think that by engaging in a love spell that you're actually enlisting extraterrestrials to help you win that person over. But that's probably the case, Carl. We'll have to maybe get some feedback from Crater on that, but that's an interesting idea.
Well, there is often an added element of manipulation to piggyback on human doings.
Yeah.
So they corrupt our world, corrupt our institutions, and the things we're taught, the things we believe. And when we start using dark practices of any kind, even just a selfish covering up of things that we really need to be more open about and that sort of thing, it's a slippery slope. And we are being monitored, and they can indeed pile on and exaggerate things to worsen situations and worsen what people might be inclined to do because of their native selfishness and perhaps being more anger based, more likely to be harsh with others, and so on. That can be ramped up
Yeah.
through mind control manipulation. So this is a danger because you're creating the ability to do dark deeds in your actions, flirting with this sort of an approach. And this is how they get humans to do horrible things,
Yeah.
acts of violence, acts of terrorism, acts of not only discrimination, but malignant personal undermining and starting of rumors and so on. And they gin this up inside people.
Yeah.
And that's when you have a mass shooting, for example. It's someone who has the ability to carry out a criminal action. They're gun lovers, they're conversant, they have weapons, but they're pushed over the edge through a manipulation.
And that
So this isn't a small thing.
no, and that manipulation could be triple fold because one, the practitioner of the dark art is putting his or her own energy into the spell, right? And
Yeah.
that person could be quite accomplished and really have something to add in terms of energetic effectiveness. And then if they enlist the assistance of dark spirits, they can directly interfere and cause all kinds of problems. And then that last level is get the ETs involved. So that's a formidable arsenal to be arrayed against a poor person that has no clue, you know.
Yeah,
So
and it's an all too common strategy to invoke dark spirits to be a kind of hitman,
yeah,
an attacker to cause trouble for someone, and they do. It's very, very common.
yeah. U.S. creator, milk sickness is a problem only dairy farmers remain aware of, but in the 1800s it was a huge problem. Abraham Lincoln's own mother died of it at a young age. Turns out the problem comes from cows ingesting a particular weed, the snakeroot plant. And just as an aside, Carl, I discovered I have one solitary snakeroot plant growing in my backyard next to my grill. I saw that and what? Is that? It is. And I don't think it's a coincidence it's there. I think it's a bit of an endorsement that we're on the right track with this thing. Uh, Continuing, the plant is toxic to humans, but apparently not to numerous herbivore animals. The toxin gets into the milk and can inflict humans with serious illness and even death. Before the cause of this danger was finally discovered, milk sickness was often attributed to witchcraft. Could this plant be from the same beings who introduced witchcraft itself? Is the plant itself an extraterrestrial import? If so, who brought it and roughly when? Are new problematic species of animals and plants still being imported today, or very recently, if not currently? And if they have stopped, why?
Well, there's 20 questions, but this is what creator answers. I think some of the key elements, at least. You are asking a very interesting and provocative question that is breaking new ground in the lack of historical appreciation for the fact that many dangerous plants and animals in the environment are not natural. They are not native species at all, but brought to the earth by extraterrestrials to cause human suffering. On one level, it is a kind of cosmic joke because the extraterrestrials love seeing people squirm by causing problems in your world. So, to introduce something truly noxious that people will be in ignorance of and will blunder into and be harmed is akin to childhood pranks of putting up a tripwire so someone will trip and fall and then laughing at their misfortune. But this goes far beyond the level of pranksters when people die as a consequence and often suffer pain encountering hostile species that might be poisonous. Many have a way of injuring a person directly through nettles and painful venom and stingers that are quite elegant biologically, but quite unpleasant and seem quite out of place in a loving world. And that is the clue about the entire aspect of so many creatures that can harm or kill human beings. This is not natural because Creator did not make you to be in a world filled with hazards and lethal pitfalls. Those harsh and deadly species are creations that were put in the alien worlds as a karmic lesson for them because they thrive through killing of their opponents to gain an advantage and fight their way to the top, if possible. That level of brutality is a form of evil that is among the most severe possible. So the dangerous predators like lions and tigers, sharks, snakes, and many deadly insects and plants were brought to the earth in droves by extraterrestrials to create a series of scourges. That strategy is, in fact, recounted in the scriptures in stories of the plagues that seem to attack one after another, because this did, in fact, happen historically and was seen as wildly improbable and thus must have been divine retribution. When the opposite was the case, it was all orchestrated by extraterrestrial beings wanting to undermine humanity. So, this snake root plant you speak of is in the same category. It was a purposeful kind of biowarfare to bring in a species that would be ingested by cattle and contaminate their milk supply and render it dangerous or useless for human consumption. That biowarfare has brought many plagues, many pandemics, and that includes the one currently circling the world. It is an alien virus, not a human lab creation.
So, you know, Creator oftentimes, this is not the first time that Creator will answer us a whole series of questions with one answer, but that one answer contains the answer to all the questions, you know. So basically, Creator is saying here that the current virus, the coronavirus, is an alien introduction. Well, it's a recent alien introduction, like in the last 3 or 4 years, last 4 or 5 years, probably, right? So by giving that as the answer, Creator is certainly not saying explicitly, but hinting at the idea that the snake root plant probably has not been here for thousands of years, and it might only have arrived 500 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So Creator's definitely saying that this is an ongoing thing, and the idea that they can't introduce a new plant tomorrow is certainly not true. They can, absolutely.
Yes. Well, this is sad but true. It gives us no joy to make these revelations. But if we don't learn what the true source of our problems might be, then we're doomed to suffer incessantly without a solution.
Yeah.
We have to be smart enough to know what we're facing and then seek an effective response. And we're learning here today that the old way of doing things has been wrongheaded to just lash back, fight back in a physical way, look for someone who you think of as an enemy, take them out. Well, that's an invitation to ramp up the animosity. And then you have a wider war going.
Yeah.
And that has failed again and again and again. You know, if only after uh, causing math's death to finally peter out for a time because people just get exhausted and depleted and troops that can be sent into battle and so on.
Yeah.
And so finally people in a way come to their senses, but it's more an exhaustion and a sense of hopelessness that they just give in and give up.
Yeah. And you know, one thing I want to add on observation on this plant thing, you know, there's a huge problem in this country with invasive species of both plants and animals, you know. And it's always funny whenever I, you know, come across one and try to trace it back and say, well, where did this come from? The answer is always Asia. You know, not where in Asia in particular, just like, well, it's from over there somewhere, you know. But if you do any research and try to figure, you know, pinpoint where in Asia it come from, it gets pretty murky. So I think that's just a common whitewash that they really don't know where these plants come from. They just show up all of a sudden.
Yeah, and
Oh,
we've done a series of webinars about this particular issue and the many scourges and species really don't belong here. And it makes sense if you
yeah,
stop and think what we were taught by Creator about it all, that the world, the earth, was designed to be a loving nest for the divine human, not a dangerous place that
Yeah.
has hostile and unfriendly species that are readily willing to attack human beings.
Yeah.
So things like the mosquito and so on, which is such a nasty, unpleasant thing. You can't go out at night in many areas of the world. You have to sleep with mosquito netting and so on. But it, it, it's it's ghastly. Well,
It's just
it was
horrible.
it was created for an alien world as a karmic kind of lesson.
Yeah.
They didn't learn from it, and they inflicted it on us. So there was a divine backfiring, perhaps, in some respects.
Yeah.
But this is showing us something very important
Yeah. I
about
agree.
how things happen and where they start.
Yep. Absolutely. U.S. creator witches are often associated with poisonings. People were implored never to accept gifts from those suspected of being witches. In fact, in German, the word gift means poison. Klein wrote, through spreading physical illness through purported acts of generosity, witches upset the balance between neighbors at a time when sharing and exchanging goods was not only a common practice, it was a necessary element of community life. What can Creator tell us?
All right. And Creator says, here again has a basis in truth that a common practice for deliberate psychic attacks is to impart physical objects with a negative thought form that can impart harm to someone in the vicinity. The practitioner of witchcraft will use a cording, it's a kind of energy, to the contaminated object. And if the person touches it or takes it home, there will be a cording to the individual and location that can be a conduit for attacking psychic energy to be delivered to the intended victim quite readily. Such practices still abound where people might find animal bones near their door, tufts of hair being removed, and other objects from their possession in order to create curse type energy and deliver it through the cording to the original person whose hair was taken or some other possession. And that curse will travel to the victim via the cording they have to the object. There are many ways objects can become associated with dark spirits as well. And here again, the spirits themselves can be enlisted to aid with an attack scenario, or even just in providing general harassment, will be contributing to dark aims of a practitioner using witchcraft to attack someone. Indeed, it is possible to kill someone through psychic attacks alone if the person is vulnerable, meaning that they have a karmic vulnerability because of prior trauma to lower their defenses and create inner vulnerability to a reoccurrence of the same type of negativity that they've had encounters with and been harmed by in other lifetimes, for example. That does not mean once a victim, always a victim, but life can become that way to people who seem to suffer bad luck as a way of life, when in fact the reason for their misfortunes is all tied to karmic forces redelivering to them bouts of negativity again and again and again, because it is a karmic debt they owe. There might also be a continuation of an attack scenario, even from individuals they have had a prior lifetime with, seeking them out in a new incarnation and wanting to continue a vendetta, and will seek to cause harm over and over again. And that can keep a person off balance and miserable through having repeated accidents, injuries, illnesses, and problems with their career, their relationships, and on, depending on how those attack energies find a matching vulnerability and exploit it.
Oh, we could spend 10 minutes talking on this, Carl, but we're got to move along. Time is ticking away. U.S. creator witchcraft is mysterious, partly because its history has been largely lost in just the span of a century. A lot of people would be tempted to think, good riddance. But the fact that social change of this magnitude can happen and be forgotten so quickly and in just a few generations suggests something far more sinister is behind it all. Can Creator share how empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol can protect us from the hazards of witchcraft and heal those who introduced its nefarious practice to humanity in the first place?
All right, Creator tells us the continued presence and practice of the dark arts all around the world, even though it may have faded into the background in highly developed advanced societies who no longer rely on superstition, seemingly, there remains a core of serious practitioners who cause much damage and continue spreading evil far and wide. This originated with the interlopers, both dark spirits as well as extraterrestrials. This kind of approach, to use one's anger as a weapon, is a natural fit in the absence of moral constraints and a divine level vibration that will recognize evil as something needing restitution, readjustment, realignment, and reconfiguration to save someone turning to evil methods so their life is not compromised eventually and having to make amends for their error. It is no different than any act of criminality. In fact, it is just less appreciated by society as a serious and real problem that causes real harm. But we can tell you that the consequences of a karmic reckoning can be every bit as unpleasant and serious as encountering a criminal investigation by law enforcement agencies and serving prison time for wrongdoing. Imprisonment is a short term problem, but a karmic backlog of obligations will follow you from life to life and may harm over and over again until eventually it gets rebalanced through a repayment. Such a karmic debt can ruin a series of lifetimes that are all traceable back to one lifetime of reckless conduct in service to the self through manipulating and harming others through things like witchcraft, done simply through selfishness. But all such thoughtless acts will come back to the perpetrator to have a reckoning eventually. What is needed to change the world, to raise the level of discourse and conduct? When people are unhappy, they will be more likely to be tempted to take shortcuts to find a way to manipulate others and gain an advantage that might be bending or breaking rules. And something like witchcraft that is insidious and secretive may seem like just the ticket to give the powerless some power to get even and hold their own and even come out on top. At least that might be the goal, but will be found a naive assumption at best and a tragic mistake in all likelihood. Because the chickens will come home to roost one day and people will regret their reckless disregard for others as well as their own immorality and track record. Everything that happens in life is recorded for all of time. There are no secrets either. Sooner or later, everyone must pay their karmic debt. When one is a victim of such things, one needs a friend. And there is no better friend than Creator, who will understand such dynamics and can bring help to bear to work on perpetrators causing harm as well as the victim, to begin healing and restoration of what was damaged. And together, this can lead to better times, circumstances, and progress for both perpetrators and victims alike. That is the goal of Creator's plan, for you to bring this about through your efforts as divine humans here, as change agents to take on the problem of evil and solve it by bringing healing first to the perpetrators and then to yourselves and other human victims. That will complete a cycle of learning and growth intended to make you seasoned veterans in reckoning with negativity of an evil nature. If you can surmount this challenge, you will have earned your wings, so to speak, to fly high, to be ambassadors of the divine anywhere and everywhere in the universe. And you will have the wherewithal to prevent such misfortunes happening elsewhere and head off in time a darkening. So never again will things get as bad as they are on the earth through its history and still today, where so many are lost, being disconnected from awareness of the divine as non believers, and will live diminished lives because of it. They will also more likely fall prey as victims of manipulations of all kinds. Dealing with someone using witchcraft against you might be very difficult, even with divine help, because free will, even of perpetrators, must be acknowledged. The answer is deep healing, not corralling them and locking them up. That is a human level strategy and brings mixed results at best. It is not a long term answer. There needs to be a raising up of all beings. So, at a high enough vibration, you will be at a level where such conduct becomes unthinkable. That is when you will have truly arrived and proven yourselves as true bringers of light and divine emissaries who can be trusted to travel throughout the universe and allow an opening up of possibilities never before in existence because of the risks that evil might arise in too great and widespread a degree and destroy, in effect, the universe and all its potential. This is Creator's wisdom in using your galaxy as a testing and proving ground. It is a test of you and humanity as a whole. But if you embrace the divine and ask for assistance, you can do almost anything, particularly in bringing love to bear on problems, setting things right, and applying deep healing through requests to the divine that can rebalance and rework things to change the destiny of all involved. You must believe in the divine and you must want to have a life of purpose and choose to use empowered prayer and the Lightworker healing protocol, ideally, as a way to help raise up the interlopers and to save humanity as well through healing. That is a most noble goal and will be an amazing achievement that will stand for all of time. But you must choose to take up the challenge. It is safe to do this in the privacy of your own mind, to form a partnership and to request healing on a regular basis in ways that can work. That is not much to ask, but can make all the difference if you and others as well join together and reach a quorum of human intention needed for a change in direction. And that will change everything for the better. We await your decision.
So there's an awful lot of implications here, Carl. One observation I have is, consider that you're a victim of, or you suspect, for instance, that you're a victim of witchcraft. What do you do, right? What are your choices? And if you think, well, I want to fight back, you can hire somebody, but then you're just fighting fire with fire. That's a problem. But even if you wanted to, say, heal the perpetrator, if you think about it, um, if you use some healing modalities like Reiki, for instance, which is a form of remote healing, right? Chances are you're only using your energy. So it's going to be your energy versus their energy. And if they're a really dark practitioner, they may be able to overcome your efforts. On top of that, you're advertising yourself. You're saying, hey, here I am. You're setting out an intuitive reach, and that's going to get noticed by dark spirits, by the ETs, as well as by that dark practitioner himself, him or herself, for instance. So suddenly, remote healing of the perpetrator, which is really a divine act, is problematic if you're not using a divinely sanctioned solution, because only with the invocation of the divine, calling on Creator and the divine realm by name, sending the card to their address and not any other address, do you get the benefits of secrecy, protection, invisibility, because you can safely say prayers to Creator and it's not going to be detected. They're not going to hear it. They're not going to be able to listen in on it. They're not going to be witness to it. And the same goes true for the response from Creator, that the solution that Creator implements is going to be invisible. The only thing that will be visible later on is the positive change that may have taken place, but only in hindsight. So you really got to think about this, people. you know, this is a complex problem, but it needs a powerful solution. And really, divine intervention via divine prayer, via prayer to the divine, is really the only way to do this, Carl.
Well, and the Lightworker Healing Protocol in particular goes very deep and wide, addressing all kinds of things that are a component of this sort of phenomenology and the dynamic of it, where you have a perpetrator going after someone. Creators commented in the course of the discussion today many times there's a karmic connection underway, a prior life where people have been together. And now in the current one, there's a grudge match still perpetuated and often employing the dark arts to keep that going.
Yeah.
I have a client who has a warlock going after her and using dark spirits who are adept in manipulating nerves in the living, causing chronic pain in this person and reinforcing it relentlessly. They've been in past lives together as husband and wife and lord and master and supplicant and various roles that they played that got this dynamic going of punish and be victimized and then turning the tables and back and forth it goes. Well, when does that end? Unless you stop the fight.
Right.
That's the wisdom of divine healing through love-based healing manipulations using the divine ability to go across timelines and even start healing past lifetimes in addition to the current one. That's the power and reach of divine healing on the march. You
Yeah.
can't get that anywhere else.
No, because Reiki is, and we don't want to. I don't want to dump on Reiki. It's a very valid healing modality, but it doesn't have the reach because, first of all, the Reiki is mainly the practitioner's energy that's being used, whereas with the Lightworker Healing Protocol, Creator in the divine realm is doing all the work. They're and the work they can do is so much vaster and all comprehensive than we could possibly even begin to imagine. The whole Lightworker Healing Protocol, soul matrix healing that goes back in time, parallel time, future time, and reaches everybody who's been touched by a threat of karma. The victims, the victims' loved ones, the recurring hurts and pains. I mean, it goes through and takes care of everything. It takes some time. It's not an instant solution in many cases, but it's comprehensive. And that's the kind of healing we're talking about when we talk about saving humanity, Carl, is that really it's the soul matrix healing for the galaxy is really what we're trying to achieve here.
Yes, this is a very comprehensive way of healing anything and everything because everything is traceable to karma or an energetic implementation that might be brand new in people coming together and then something bad happens and someone wants a punishment and harm to come to someone and it starts the ball rolling in a new karmic event. All goes on record and it'll come back around to those individuals and they'll be essentially set up to replay their roles as perpetrator and victim. Karma has a way of turning the tables at times as well. So a former perpetrator might in a new lifetime be a victim of someone doing the same things they did to others. You don't want that. So you don't want to fight fire with fire and have a worse time as a victim by engaging in the wrong approaches that are unethical and out of divine alignment. But it isn't necessary. If everyone aligns with the divine, the darkness can be overcome and rather swiftly. The
Yes,
problem is we haven't had people coming together in unison in the right way, knowing what's needed, knowing how to ask for divine intervention and what the divine realm needs to do. That is a level of education that's been ongoing fitfully all through history, through divine prophecy. But for the first time, we're getting to the core of these issues in a way through channeling to get chapter and verse if we ask the right questions.
Yeah.
And we're learning how to go about this now in a way
Yes.
that's never been done in human history.
And it's important to emphasize this is divine healing. This is not divine vengeance. The solution is healing. It's restoring souls everywhere back to being in divine alignment. That's the ultimate goal. And that's what we're all about with the Get Wisdom Project. I'm afraid that's it for this show. Thanks, Carl.
All right, be well.